So viewers, hi, I hope you all are doing well. This is Nargis Zahra with the new episode of Old Theatre with New Players. And today we have on board with us Assistant Professor from University of Jammu, Miss Ellora Puri. And she is one of my favorite political scientists, and I have always loved discussing political structures with her. So it's really a treat for me to have her on board to discuss emerging world order. And we are going to discuss emerging world order with reference of democracy. And we are not refraining our analysis in this short period of time to one region of the world. We are just comparing. So just try to follow us for this interesting session. Thank you so much. Welcome on board, Ms. Ellora.
Thank you so much, Nargis, and congratulations on starting this new program.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was really looking forward to have something like this, and I'm so happy that I've got a chance. So now that this word like this year has been quite disorienting for the governments and the people alike, and we have seen that with this COVID-19 there was this politics which people initially in the first 2 months did not realize. People means the citizens, but the government have used this reason to somehow strengthen their control over their citizens, over the laws. And there are countries where they had emergency powers centralized, and it was kind of that the balance was towards autocratization of the system and not democratization, even in some of the democracies of the world. And it was felt as need of the time, but we are just observing that the lockdowns around the world are now softening. Life is going back to the normal, but democracies are not going back to the normal. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year, of course, for all of us. And you're right, and this is a trend which has been noticed by political analysts and political scientists across the world, and actually not even analysts. It's actually been noticed by journalists and people who are just random people who follow news. The fact of the matter is, and you use the term autocratization. That's a term which has been used by a few scholars, especially this group of scholars who work on collecting data under something called VDEM, varieties of democracies. And this term has been used by them in the context of what they feel is, a kind of, a process by virtue of which what is happening is that established democracies are actually moving towards becoming autocracies. And according to them, this has been happening since mid 1990s or so, and they call it the third wave of autocratization. And this and of course, when they look at the data, what the conclusion that they've come to is, one of the examples, the biggest example, of course, is Trump's America, which is seeing, according to them, it's seeing autocratization. And of course, you have other examples like Brazil, like India, like Hungary, And interestingly enough, when you look at the COVID situation, almost all these countries, if you were to spell them out and if you were to look at the names of these countries in terms of that discussion which is happening about increasing executive power, increasing, state power, courtesy the fact that, these countries, they needed to undertake certain kind of emergency measures to deal with the COVID situation. Almost all these countries have had that situation. India has had the most severe lockdown in the world. If you want to look at the numbers, it has had the most severe lockdown in the world. And, people have thought and people have talked about it in terms of how this has meant consolidation of more executive power, centralization of more power with the Indian state. And of course, we know about Hungary, everybody's been talking about Hungary. And there is this, of course, people have been saying how it is become, in a way, the first autocracy of the post-Cold War era, in Europe. Because, of course, Europe saw this large-scale process of democratization post-1991. And Hungary was one of those countries which was becoming democracy. But, over the last few years with Viktor Orban, the president, he's basically become an autocrat there. But in this period, the COVID period, that power that he was consolidating, he's increased that much more so. And similar things have happened in Turkey. So you can think of it across the world in some senses. So autocratization was happening, that process was happening, people were talking about it, but it seems as if under the COVID period, COVID-19 period that we talk about, that has accelerated considerably. It has accelerated, and exponentially and considerably, you can think of it across actually. And we really don't know if the easing of lockdowns is going to mean the reduction in terms of the power that the state apparatuses across the world have acquired. So, states get addicted to power. States get addicted to power and they do not want to let go of it. So, here's, keeping our fingers crossed that some of them would at least, But given the kind of leadership that you have in places like India, in Turkey, Hungary, as I said, and Brazil, the kind of, leaderships that you have, it's going to take a lot of energy for people to take back that power from them. So I think this is, an ongoing thing, and we'll have to observe how it, proceeds.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as you said that, okay, the somehow this trajectory of autocratization of a democratic system was already there. And then you use this term established democracies. Established democracies, what I understand from this is like the democracies where there are no coups, and where the governments are not toppled over, and they just complete their terms, and then the elections are there. And so what is the reason, other than COVID, why was it happening?
That is a point of discussion, and people have been trying to understand that, and, I would, basically two kinds of, I would see, processes which are coming together. One is, there's something happening in our societies. There's something happening in our societies, whether it is, England, Great Britain, or if you're talking about the United States, or you're talking about Turkey, or you're talking about India. There's something happening in our societies which is actually leading to the kind of people who are being elected. So if we are electing, say, Modi in India, and you're electing Erdogan in, Turkey, and you're electing Trump in the US, and you, of course, electing people like Boris Johnson in Great Britain, it's very interesting. These people are all getting majorities. They're getting popular support, and this popular support is, something which is at a certain level, in many a time, many people use the term cultish, right? So, people are supporting this unfiltered support for this kind of leadership. And, interestingly enough, this is the leadership which wants more power. This is the leadership which is, hungering for that power, and is consolidating that power, and is leading to, suppression of those very freedoms which are allowing, that support for them. So the people who are supporting them, in a way, are actually getting the wrong end of the stick once they actually, elect them. But still, that support maintains itself. So it's very interesting. There are two things which are coming together. You have this, politics which is playing out, which is, politics of populism, as they say. But, that is dependent upon popular support. That's the reason why you say populism, right? It is dependent upon support from the population itself. But the population is willing to give that blind support, willing to ignore the usurpation of power, by this political elite which is coming to power. It's willing to overlook any form of, taking over of media, taking over of judiciary, getting rid of opposition, questioning the very institutions which shore up democracies in these places. people are willing to overlook that. There's something happening in our societies, and one wonders what it is. One really wonders what it is. And we're still trying to, I grapple with it. Why would societies which are such diverse societies like the United States or India, such diverse societies still lead to these strong men being elected, strong men being elected, who actually do not value diversity, who do not value individual freedom, who do not value minority rights. So it's very interesting. One doesn't really, one is trying to grapple with it, but it's happening. It's a coming together of two things. One is this societal hunger for putting their faith in one leader somewhere, and of course this political leadership or political elite which is aspiring to acquire that power. So both of them together are resulting in this situation in which you're seeing that backsliding. You're seeing what is being called autocratization by certain people. And in fact, if you were to say, it's very interesting because suddenly there is this state of literature, in political science. So, I know for the last 2 years or so, if you were to follow any kind of discussions which are happening between political scientists, one book which has become very popular in terms of what has to be taught to the students in comparative politics, particularly, is How Democracies Die. So that, it's just that title, that tells you a lot. And people actually are reading that in the context of Trump's America, and they say basically what is happening is democracies are not dying because of coups. As you mentioned, coup would result in Pakistan. We know, how most of the times what has happened is the subversion of democracy has been very drastic. It has happened through coups, right? But in this case, when you're talking about what is happening in terms of autocratization, it's not happening by drastic events. It's happening courtesy, subversion within the institutions itself. So, it's a slow process, it's a gradual process. It's not something which is instant. It's not something which is volcanic. It's not something which is visible immediately. But it is slowly happening with the undermining of institutions, with the undermining of, checks and balances which have to be in place if you have if you have to have a functional democracy. But that is something which is happening. So one needs to understand that, but also recognize that process which is underplay at this point.
Thank you so much. I really did, it's such a comprehensive analysis. And that I think takes the responsibility, the bug of responsibility to the door of voter, because these are the voters in these democracies that we mentioned, India and Turkey and United States of America, from three different regions, and the established democracies, as I should say. And but then why voter is going to elect people from different constituencies and making a picture, a national picture of leader who won't control, who don't I think who don't value democratic values as such, and the democratic addressing is in symbols, I think. So if I may add here, what I have come to know, that President Trump has quite, healthy chances of win these elections also, because America is a capitalist society, and he is such a, he's such a good news for the business community in America, that no matter what happens, because of the tax reliefs this community has had in last years of his term in presidency, they are gonna vote for him, no matter the slogans of democracy or freedom of expression, because then they can go to judiciary for that. They have law for that, and the law is intact, it's in place, and it's neutral here. And so I think this is how I can, as an analyst or student of politics, I can answer it here. But what is happening in Turkey may have a different context, the mentality of the voter, because a voter who is, a now globalized voter is having access through social media to everything in the world, is having, cross-cultural understanding and exposure, which gives you a sense of mutual harmony to coexist and have patience. But why voters are losing patience? Do you think it has something to do with the same digital explosion of information we do have, that we are insecure as ethnic groups or ethnic identities or something?
Okay, yeah. Uh, I would, actually, I want to put Trump's America in that large framework itself, except for the fact that American democracy is much more robust in comparison with a lot many other democracies. And the reason why it seems to be robust at this point, at least for me, uh, is because of the kind of press that they have. Unlike most other countries, which are, as we said, established democracies, because judiciary, we know, given how American system works, whosoever wins elections basically is going to determine who's going to be sitting on your judicial bench. So unlike actually other countries which have fixed terms for their judges, there are certain methods by which you have to pass certain exams, and that's the reason why you sit in a bench, etc., etc. Unlike that, in the US, you actually have judiciary basically being dependent upon the electoral branch somewhere. So I don't think judiciary has, it is meant to act as a check, but at least at this point in time, given with RBG's death, etc., what is happening at this point in time, we realize that it can be it can act as a big instrument of subversion of democracy, when it comes to the US, at least in present circumstances. But what is holding fort in terms of shoring up democracy, I think, is the press. It's the press in the US, and that is something which can be contrasted with when it comes to Turkey, when it comes to other countries. So what you see in Turkey or other countries that we talk about, again, the same thing. Judiciary and press are very important, I feel, and what has happened in Turkey is after AKP came to power, they have subverted judiciary, they have subverted the press, and essentially almost all the press institutions, the newspapers, TV, etc., etc., whatever you talk about, have essentially been co-opted into the state apparatus in some fashion or the other in Turkey. So that is something which is, I think, both judiciary and the press being co-opted, I think, is actually making it more autocratic than I would say US is. Of course, US at the scale in any case is very high up when it comes to being a democracy, it being a democracy. But the backsliding that you see in the case of US, I feel has been slower. There has been much more friction, courtesy the press, courtesy the free press that they have. You where you're sitting, you have. But as I said, Turkey is one example. But of course, that social media thing that you asked about and that you talked about, that is true even for the United States. It's just not true for Turkey. What we are talking about is polarization, which is happening, and you talked about ethnicities, right? So I would say identity politics, right? Identity instead of using ethnicity, because that becomes a technical term, etc. But just identity politics. Social media heightens emotions. It heightens emotions. It we talked about how it ghettoizes your understanding of your worlds essentially. So you are inclined to talk to people who believe the things that you believe in, who believe in the same politics that you believe in, who profess similar kind of understanding of the world as you do. So you like to talk to those people, right? You like to talk to those people. So it's very easy to shut yourself off from differing opinions, from different experiences, from different people essentially. So social media is a very important medium at this point in time in terms of how it's polarizing societies, whether it's the United States, whether it's Turkey, whether it's India, or even for that matter, Myanmar. We saw what happened with Facebook with Rohingyas, right, in Myanmar. The fact that they were targeted the way they were. So you see that across the world, and I feel it's just not true for a country like Turkey, but it's true across the world. I feel that, that's my take on that.
Uh, so just correct me. What I'm getting is that we are kind of observing a recession of liberal democracies, right? We have established democracies, but we are observing recession of liberal democracies.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Right, fine. So moving on to the next question. Now that we stand at a point where
Okay, I like to make a distinction. I guess your viewers could have some idea about the distinction between the two of them. When you're talking about a liberal democracy, you're just not talking about people voting,
yes,
right?
exactly.
There's a difference between what would be called an electoral democracy, in which people just go and vote, and then
Yes,
somebody is
that's
elected, and
kind
that
of a
person.
drill. Yes, you just have a system in place,
Yeah.
and
So with a liberal democracy, what you're talking about is certain ideas of how that democracy should be put in place and should function, right? So important things like minority rights, putting in place mechanisms to save minorities from majoritarian rule, that kind of a thing, or individual rights, right? Saving individuals from state repression in some senses.
Mhm.
So those are the kind of things that you talk about when you talk about liberal democracies. That's the liberal ideas coming together with democratic ideas. So it's numbers which matter along with individuals, right? So individual rights as well as other forms of rights. That's what you're talking about. So rights is an important element when you talk about liberal democracies. While an electoral democracy, a plain electoral democracy would be just a politics of numbers. So, you're talking
Exactly.
about the majority.
Giving them some manipulative information to form their opinion and then give you back the opinion you wanted as a stakeholder of a system or the agent of power in the system. So what I do, let me add one thing. What I do like best in Indian citizens is their, I would say, indoctrination towards their right of self-determination, the way they stand to their government. Like recently, I have observed three episodes in India since last year. One was that CAA Act, and everyone made it a point to register the resentment against the act, no matter what government said, no matter how slogans were being chanted by the analysts, the government stakeholders, anyone. But the people made a point that their voices were not curbed and heard all the time. Then this episode of that's the death of that I think film star Sushant Singh Rajput. That has made people go united for a cause, and maybe many of those people were not his fans earlier. And then yes, this social media unity for this episode of this social media lockdown thing in Kashmir. So these three episodes have told me that no, the citizens are democratized in India. So that's where this, I call it an established democracy. And I don't see such people in such numbers in Turkey. If I do compare two states. Now, I'll go to my last question because I'm just looking at the clock and I really want to ask you this. This is so very important as per the emerging world order, because emerging world order is observing China as, the biggest growing economy. It has a share of 37% in world economy, and we are already feeling like something like second Cold War is is there, and we are discussing that. So China is not a democracy. China means since 1949, it has never been a democracy. So how do you just look at the future of democracies dealing with a country and a big economy like China? Because you can't help having trade with China, even a country like America. It's inevitable to have a trade with China. So how do you look at the future of democracy?
Quickly, I'll mention what you mentioned India there, and you mentioned two, three things there. I just wanted to clarify there, actually, people who came out to support, people who were protesting against the CA
Yeah.
were a very different set of people from the people who were actually protesting for, Sushant Singh.
Yeah.
So it was actually a very different set of people ideologically, and in terms of their social status, in terms of where they were sitting, etc., etc. Very different set of people and different
Yes.
understandings of world, different ideologies,
Yes, I could observe that.
different politics.
I could observe that.
Because,
Thanks for clarifying it, because obviously, it's a country of 1 billion people
uh,
and so
no,
many
no,
cultures
no.
and
There,
groups.
there was actually the reason why I'm mentioning that is because it's very important to understand they were actually polar opposites. They were actually polar opposites at a certain level. There might have been overlap somewhere. There might have been overlap somewhere. But when it came to the Citizen Amendment Act and the protests against it, it was more citizen-led. It was, on ground. It was, led by people who were affected by it. It was led by, civil society activists. It was led by, what would be called justice warriors in a way,
Yeah.
progressive people. Essentially, that's what you're talking about. While the Sushant Singh phenomena is a very, very social media phenomena. It's a more social media phenomena, and this is he died in June, and I would never remember somebody's death anniversary, but I know it because it was all
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
social. It's
14th
been
June,
all over
I
social
can,
media.
because
So
social
it's
media is not letting me forget it.
so 14th June he died, and suddenly you saw a spurt of new Twitter accounts all of a sudden. So all these justice for SSR accounts that you see, if you were to just click on them, you'll see the accounts have been made in June, July, August. So it's a very different phenomenon there, and many people are actually saying that the reason why that has come up is because of, again, related to democracy, but in a very different fashion, because there are going to be elections in Bihar in the next few months. And Sushant Singh was from Bihar, and it was felt that if his death is played up by the ruling party at this point in time, they would be able to garner votes. So that's one thing. So I just wanted to lay that down
Thank you so much for adding to that. Thank you.
because they're two different things altogether.
Yeah.
But yes, the idea of democracy, the word democracy is something which every Indian would say they believe in, they
Hmm.
aspire towards, and it's a good word. It's a good word. It's not something that you look at pejoratively. So
Yeah.
everybody would want to be a democrat. Everybody would want democracy.
Hmm.
Everybody whosoever is undertaking any kind of political activity would say that we are doing it democratically. So that's a given. So I
Hmm.
agree with you on that. When it comes to China, and we were discussing this earlier too,
Yeah.
it is something which is difficult. It is something which the world needs to grapple with. We know what is happening in terms of the US relations with China and how it has been, this yo yo kind of a thing. At times it's really good, at times it's really bad.
Yeah.
But, it's, just to see that if you were to see, if we were to just bracket US for a bit, because it becomes an outlier in a way. If you were to see Turkey, for example, if you were to see, China's relationship with Turkey and how China's relationship has actually affected Turkey and its democratization or autocratization, whatever you might think, it's interesting that the president, till around 2010 or so, would be criticizing China all across. And one of the main reasons why he was criticizing China was because of the treatment of Uyghurs, the way the Uyghurs have been treated in China, right? We know how, in Pakistan, Imran Khan is so afraid to take the name of Uyghurs, and the reason why that is so is because Pakistan is so dependent upon China. You have that kind of
I see
Pakistan and
that
China
thing.
have, yeah, yeah. So that kind of a relationship with China, so it's very difficult to for Imran Khan to even take the name. Every time he's asked about it, he's like, I haven't thought about it, and he has been thinking about it for the last 3 years. He hasn't still thought about it. He still doesn't have any idea about it. While with Turkey, it was the same case for around 10 years or so. Erdogan, till he was in, since he's been in power, he criticized China across. But slowly he became dependent. Economically, the relations deepened, and Turkey has been in bad economic situation, so it became dependent upon China. So what you see is in the last 10 years, gradually, now Erdogan is not actually, even saying the word Uyghur, and when he says the word Uyghur, it's said in a particular context. What has happened is Turkey was actually giving refuge to a lot of Uyghur, activists for a very long time. And now onwards, since since the Turkey's relationship with China has deepened, since then what has happened is that the Turkish government has actually been picking up, the people that they had given refuge to, activists, and deporting them back to China. And this has actually accompanied what has happened in terms of how the state has autocratized over a period of time. So, of course, we know from 2008, 2010, there has been this, consolidation of power by AKP, and how judiciary has been undermined and various other institutions have been undermined. But that has been accompanied by the manner in which China's relationship with Turkey has deepened, and how China's approval in a way is helping Turkey to persist as a proper economy in the world. So that is something, that's one example that you can think
No, no,
of.
I really do appreciate, because I am always, like saying that economy is the underlying factor for so many political decisions and foreign policy, diplomatic stances and narratives of the nations, because this is a ground reality which no country can overlook, no leader can overlook, because ultimately people want food on their tables, they want their job securities and the economy flourishing and developing in single or double digits. That's another thing. And this is where I put the question, like, yes, if 37% of the world growth is because of China, and US comes at second and is sharing 17% of the economic growth. So there is a difference, a lot of difference. So thank you so very much. And I really don't want to wind it up, but these are late hours at your place. We engaged you, and double thank you for that. And this gives me another lead to another program, the China's economy and the new world order. So,
All
and,
the best
and
with
I
that.
would love to engage you sometime on this in detail, because this is a whole new, I think, aspect on which we should discuss and educate people. Thank you so much. Have a great time. Have a great time. It was great having you.
Yeah, you have a good day.